The domain name system, DNS, is a hierarchical system that translates human-readable domain names like example.com into numerical IP addresses like 192.0.2.1 that computers use to identify each other on a network. When you enter a domain name in your browser, your device sends a query to a DNS resolver. The resolver searches for the IP address by checking cached data or querying other DNS servers. If the resolver doesn't have the answer, it contacts a root name server which directs it to the correct top-level domain, TLD, name server, such as .com or .org. The TLD server points the resolver to the authoritative name server for the requested domain. This server provides the final IP address for the domain. The resolver then returns the IP address to the browser, which loads the website. There are different types of DNS servers. The recursive resolver acts as an intermediary between the user and other DNS servers. The root name server is the first step in translating domain names to IPs. The TLD name server manages domains under specific TLD, like .com or .net. And the authoritative name server stores DNS records, such as a, CNAME, and MX records for a domain. Common DNS records include the record, which maps a domain to an IPv4 address, the AAA record, which maps a domain to an IPv6 address, the CNAME record, which serves as an alias for another domain name, the MX record, which specifies mail servers for email, and the TXT record, which stores arbitrary text, such as SPF and DKIM for email authentication. In earlier days, websites were accessed through their IP addresses. It was difficult for an individual to remember all the IP addresses to access the websites. So, the domain names were created and mapped with IP addresses. Like a phone book where all the contact numbers are stored under respective names and accessed by the contact names, the domain name system, DNS, maintains all the directories of domain names and helps us to access the websites associated with them. In a network, information has to pass through many layers to reach its destination. The application layer is one among these layers. There are several applications in the application layer, and DNS, domain name system, is one among them. The Internet works based on IP addresses, not domain names. But it is easy to use domain names to refer to them rather than the long numbers, IP address. To enable the use of domain names in a network, the domain name system, DNS, is used. DNS provides the domain name to IP address mapping through name servers. To know more about how DNS works, first we need to know about IP address, URL, and DNS components. So, let us see about each in detail. While typing a web address, for example, www.10schools.gov.in, DNS translates it into a machine-friendly IP address, for example, 35.173.69.207, and directs your internet connection to the correct website. American computer scientist Paul V. Mocker-Petris, together with John Postel, invented the Internet Domain Name System, DNS. John Postel was an administrator of the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, IANA, until his death, and he was known as the God of the Internet. Internet Protocol, IP, address is simply the logical address in the network layer. Like how the door number is used to differentiate the individual house from others in the same apartment, the IP address is also used to find the host system in the whole network. Due to the increasing number of systems in a network, there is a need for more addresses. It leads to two addressing methods, i.e., IPv4 and IPv6. The IPv4 address is a 32-bit unique address given to a computer on the network. So, no two systems on the network can have the same IP address. If the network has P connections, then P addresses should be there. An address space is the total number of addresses that can be made by the protocol IP. It is determined by the number of bits that the protocol uses. If the protocol uses n bits, then the address space of that protocol would be 2n addresses. So, the number of addresses that can be formed in IPv4 is 232. There are two ways to represent the IP addresses, binary notation and dotted decimal notation. In binary notation, the address is expressed as 32-bit binary values. For example, 001100 11000 100 100 1110000000011. In dotted decimal notation, the address is written in decimal format separated by dots. The IPv6 address is a 128-bit unique address given to a computer on the network. The number of addresses that can be formed in IPv6 is to 128. In an IPv6 address, the 128 bits are divided into 8 16-bit blocks. Each block is then changed into 4-digit hexadecimal numbers separated by colon symbols. For example, 2001, 0000, 3231, DFE1, 0063, 0000, 0000, FEF. Uniform Resource Locator, URL, is the address of a document on the Internet. It is made up of 4 parts: protocols, host name, folder name, and file name. Each part has its own specific functions. Depending on the application, additional information can be added to the URL. For example, in the URL http://sites/default/files/press_d/press_pr0701119a.jpg. HTTP is a protocol. www.cmis.tn.gov.in is a domain name. Sites default files press_release are the folders. And pr0701119a.jpg is the file name. These are all the basic information that can be obtained from a URL. Depending on the location of the document, the URL is divided into 2 types: absolute URL and relative URL. The absolute URL is the complete address of a document on the Internet. It contains all the information that is required to find the files on the Internet. This is similar to a postal address. If any of the information is missing, then the post will not be delivered to the right person. Similarly, if any of the 4 parts is missing, then the browser will not be able to link to the specific file. So, all 4 parts are very important in an absolute URL. The relative URL is the partial address of a document on the Internet. The relative URL contains only a file name or a file name with folder name. We can use this type of URL when the file is on the same server related to the current document. There are 3 important components in the domain name system. They are namespace, name server, zone, and resolver. The domain names must be very unique and appropriate. The names should be selected from a namespace. The namespace can be organized in 2 ways: flat namespace and hierarchical namespace. The flat namespace is where the name is assigned to the IP address. They do not have any specific structure. In this flat namespace, some meaningful names are given to IP address for accessing. The major disadvantage of flat namespace is that they cannot be used in large systems, because they need to be accessed and controlled centrally to avoid ambiguity and redundancy. But it is difficult in a flat name system. To avoid this major disadvantage, hierarchical namespace is widely used. Hierarchical namespace is where the name is made up of several parts. The first part may represent the nature of the organization, the second part may represent the name of the organization, and the third part may represent the department of the organization, and so on. In this way, the power to control the namespace can be decentralized. Domain namespace was designed to achieve hierarchical namespace. In this, the names are represented as a tree-like structure with a root element on the top. This tree can have a maximum of 128 levels starting from the root element, taking level 0 to level 127. It represents the domain namespace where the root element is present at the topmost level, i.e. level 0. The root element always represents the null string. The next level to the root element is node. Each node in the tree has a label and a domain name. Each node in the DNS tree-like structure has a name called a label. Label is a string having a maximum of 63 characters. Each node in that level should have different labels, thereby assuring the individuality of the domain name. The domain name is the sequence of labels. In a domain name, the sequence of labels is separated by a dot, dot. The domain name is always read from the lower level to higher level, i.e., from the leaf node to root node. Challenger.atc.fhda.edu is the domain name which is obtained by reading the labels from bottom to top, separating each label by a dot. Basic rules of domain names. Domain names can consist of alphabets, AZ, and the digits 0 to 9. Hyphens are allowed, but hyphens cannot be used as the first character of a domain name. Spaces are not allowed. Special symbols, such as $ and underscore and so on, are not permitted. The entire domain name may be at most 253 characters long. Domain names are not case-sensitive. Generic top-level domain names, GTLD top-level domain is the last part of a domain name. Generic top-level domains are used for generic purpose. For example, .com is used for commercial purpose and .edu is for educational purpose. It is maintained by IANA. Some GTLDs and their usages are listed below. Com, commercial organization, edu, educational institutions, gov, government, US, mil, military groups, org, non-profit organization, net, networking organization, info, information service providers. Country top-level domain names, CTLD, country domain uses to character country abbreviation according to country. For example, google.in for India, google.us for US. Country domain names, CTLD, domain name country. In India, US, United States, FR, France, UK, United Kingdom, CA, Canada, AU, Australia, LK, Sri Lanka, BD, Bangladesh, CN, China, PK, Pakistan, JP, Japan, SG, Singapore. Name server is a main part of the domain name system, DNS. It is a software program that runs on a physical system. It has the DNS database consisting of domain names and their corresponding IP addresses. Name server translates the domain name to IP address. There is a need to store a large number of domain names for worldwide usage, so plenty of servers are used in a hierarchical manner. Name servers do the important task of searching the domain names. While you are searching for a website, the local name server, provided by your ISP, asks the different name servers until one of them finds the answer. At last, it returns the IP address for that domain name. Your computer is now connected to the requested web page. Inverse domain performs the opposite task of a normal DNS query. It converts the IP address to domain name. There are three types of name servers which control the entire domain name system. Root name server, which is the top-level server that contains the entire DNS tree maintained by ICANN with 13 servers. Primary name server, which contains zone resource records that are updatable by domain name holders, and secondary name server, which contains a copy of primary server files. This server has no authority to update but reduces the workload of the primary server by sharing the queries. The entire namespace is divided into many different zones. A zone is a group of contiguous domains and subdomains. If the zone has a single domain, then the zone and domain are the same. Every zone has a server which contains a database called a zone file. Using the zone file, the DNS server replies to the queries about hosts in its zone. There are two copies of zone files available, the master file and the slave file. A domain is a subtree in the DNS tree-like structure. A zone is a group of contiguous domains and subdomains. Domain namespace is an entire collection of domains, subdomains, and zones. A name server manages the database of domain names and corresponding IP addresses. A server can contain more than one zone file. A zone can contain more than one subdomain. The resolver is a program which is responsible for initiating the translation of a domain name into an IP address. Since a resolver is stored in the host, there is no need for any protocol to form a connection between the resolver and the user program. ICANN, The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers is the non-profit organization that assigns names and numbers for all Internet resources like domain names and IP addresses. How does DNS work? When the user enters the URL in the browser, the system first checks its DNS cache for the corresponding IP address. If the IP address is found in the cache, then the information is retrieved from the cache. If not, the system needs to query the resolver about the IP address from the Internet Service Provider. Each resolver has its own cache, and if it is found in that, then that information is retrieved. If not, then the query is passed to the next domain server, the TLD, which reviews the request and directs the query to name servers associated with that specific domain. Until the query is solved, it is passed to the next level domains. Finally, the IP address is detected and the corresponding record is sent to the resolver. Then the resolver returns the record back to the computer browser. Now the user can view the web pages for the detected IP address. Web server is a program running on dedicated machine which handle the queries of www end user. Server is used to host the websites and to deliver the contents of websites using HTTP. While typing the URL in browser, the browser sends the URL to DNS. After getting an IP address from DNS, it sends the request to the web server with IP address. Now the content of websites appear on browser. Authority of ICANN. IANA does the overall management of the DNS root server, IP addressing, and other Internet Protocol resource handling. IANA takes care of a number of key aspects of the DNS, including the root zone, and the domains.int and .irpa. The Voice is a service of ICANN. It is a free, publicly available directory containing the details of registered domain names and their owners. Domain Name System, DNS, maintains all the directory of domain names and help us to access the websites using the domain names. It translates the domain name into IP address. IP address is a logical address used to uniquely identify a computer over the network. There are two types, IPv4 and IPv6. IPv4 address is a 32-bit unique address given to a computer or a device. There are two ways to represent the IP address, binary notation, decimal notation. IPv6 address is a 128-bit unique address given to a computer or a device. It follows hexadecimal number notation. URL, Uniform Resource Locator, is the address of a document on the Internet. URL is classified into two types, absolute URL and relative URL. URL is made up of four parts protocols, domain name, folder name, and file name. Absolute URL contains all the four necessary and fundamental parts of URL. Relative URL contains file name with folder name or just the file name. There are four important components in the domain name system. They are namespace, name server, zone, and resolver. Label is a string which can have maximum of 63 characters. Each node in that level should have unique label. Domain namespace is a tree-like structure with root element on the top. It can have a maximum of 128 levels starting from root element taking the level 0 to level 127. Domain name is the sequence of labels separated by dot. The domain name is always read from the leaf node to root node. The root node always represent null string. Name servers are programs that run on a physical system and store all the zone data. It provides to clients when queried by them. Zone is the contiguous part up to which the server has access. The domain assigned for the server does not divide into further subdomains, then zone is same as domain. Resolver, a client-server application, initiates the process of resolving the domain names. DNS domain name system, an internet service that translates domain name into IP address. IP address used to uniquely identify a computer over the network. URL Uniform Resource Locator, the address of a specific web page or file on the Internet. Domain namespace, a naming system on which domain names are in a hierarchical and logical tree structure. Domain name, a symbolic name associated with an IP address. Name server contains the DNS database, which consists of domain names and their corresponding IP addresses. The domain name system, DNS, offers several advantages that make it a crucial part of Internet infrastructure. DNS makes the Internet user-friendly by allowing people to use domain names instead of remembering complex numerical IP addresses. DNS is highly scalable, allowing millions of domain names to be managed efficiently across global networks. DNS caching improves browsing speed by storing frequently accessed domain information, reducing lookup times. DNS supports load balancing by distributing traffic across multiple servers, ensuring better performance and uptime. DNS security extensions help protect against attacks like DNS spoofing and cache poisoning by verifying the authenticity of DNS responses. When a website changes its IP address, DNS updates automatically without requiring users to remember new addresses. The hierarchical structure and multiple DNS servers provide redundancy, ensuring Internet availability even if some servers fail. DNS enables email communication through MX records, directing emails to the right mail servers. DNS helps CDNs serve content from geographically closer servers, improving website load times and reducing latency. Instead of relying on a single database, DNS is decentralized, making it more robust against failures and cyber attacks. ICANN Internet Corporation for Assigned Name and Numbers, non-profit organization which regulates an Internet. IANA Internet Assigned Numbers Authority (IANA) is an affiliated authority of ICANN. Zone a group of contiguous domains and subdomains in the domain namespace. The Resolver program, which is responsible for initiating the translation of a domain name into an IP address. TLD top-level domain, domains below the root domain. IPv4 IPv6 Internet Protocol version 4/6.
I just want to take a moment to express my gratitude for your support. Every time you watch my videos, it motivates me to create even more content that you love. If you find value in what I share, please consider liking and sharing. It really helps spread the word and brings more amazing people into our community. Your engagement not only fuels my passion, but also helps me improve and explore new ideas. So, if something resonates with you, don't hesitate to hit that like button and share it with your friends. Together, we can make this channel a vibrant space for everyone. Thank you for being a part of this journey.